Good evening, everybody. I'm thrilled that you're here. Tonight we are doing the third in our series of narcissism expert interviews. And tonight I'll have on with me a good friend of mine who lives in Liverpool, and she comes from South Africa originally. And she's an EFT, emotional freedom technique expert, as well as a women's empowerment coach. And we've known each other for a few months now, and we have a lot in common, a lot of similar things. And Shona is here. Cool. Jane, awesome. And Jeannie, cool. I'm glad you made it. Okay, it says adding. Hey, Kellyanne, I'm glad you made it too. I think we're really like Shona. Oh, there you are.
Hi, hello.
Hi. How are you?
Great. How are you doing? Long time no speak.
I am well. So what time is it there?
It has gone at 12:30 p.m.
Shona is doing us a huge favor. She's doing this live stream, and there's a 5-hour time difference between me and her. And so because she's such a good sport, she's here till like 2 a.m., which is completely insane. So I'm so grateful, and I hope everybody really appreciates having you on. And so tonight we're talking about self-care in the real world, especially if you've got narcissists in your life. So Shona, I have a question for you. What experiences have you had with narcissists or narcissism that you've seen or been in relationships with, or family members? What's up with that?
Yes. Okay. So that is a great question, and I think I have to be honest with you. When I first came across the term narcissism, I had no idea what it meant. The reason I came across the term narcissism was because I was going through all this stuff in my life, and I had no idea, and I was trying to figure it out. I'm sure many of us had that experience where we need to understand. That's how it was for me anyway. So I had all these things happening in my life, and I have a master's in psychology, so my mind loves to work and try and figure out answers and figure things out, and little did I know at the time that that's actually the wrong way to go about it, in terms of not everything can be figured out with the mind and thinking things through, right? If you're anything like me,
yes. I fell into that same trap too. The trap of thinking that somehow we're smart enough and we can figure it all out. And if we just had more information, if we could just put the puzzle pieces together, that somehow it would all make sense. And I mean, I don't know about you, but there's a lot of information, and dealing with the narcissist in your life, nothing makes sense. It's all topsy-turvy. It doesn't follow things that are rational.
Oh, I'm so glad that you said that. And that's why having discussions like these really helped me figure out that I wasn't alone. I wasn't going crazy, and this wasn't a unique occurrence. And I find whenever we can get into healthy conversations with other people, where healthy conversation being where it's safe, where you're not going to get shut down, where there's none of the drama playing out, where you can actually be heard, where you can be seen as a human being in person. And I felt for me that was where part of the healing came, was just being able to speak and tell my story and be witnessed and be heard. That's a huge part of the healing, is just being able to have a healthy conversation with another human being in a safe space, where there are healthy boundaries, where both parties, or however many parties, can be heard, and we can really understand each other. Because we talked about this previously, Rita, where when we're stressed out, like, we can't really take in any information, and we can't really give clear instructions or information about what's going on for us either. So when I'm so glad that you brought that up. So my experience was, um, yeah, I was going through it just was really painful relationships, and I couldn't figure it out. I thought I was smart, intelligent. I had a master, well, not at that time, but I had a degree in psychology. I've been into personal development my whole life, always been reading books, going to conferences, always trying to figure out how to have healthy relationships because relationships are really important to me. Um, and I really went into this relationship and these relationships assuming with this assumption that the other person would reciprocate. I thought I was bringing openness, curiosity, and we can figure this out type of mentality and approach. I thought I was bringing into this relationship sort of like a can do mentality. Like, doesn't matter what happens, every relationship has difficulties and differences. I had this positivity and almost naivete where I just thought I didn't expect, I expected the other person to be like me, and want to be able to figure that out and have this. I assumed that they would have this willingness, this openness, this curiosity to make the relationship work. And I was wrong because, in my experience, this person wanted me to be basically things their way. It was non-negotiable. Um, and it was incredibly difficult for me because I believed, with all the best will in the world, that we'd want to basically try and work it out and make it work. And I was just like, basically, this relationship really allowed me. It was a gift in some ways because, as narcissistic and toxic and unhealthy as that relationship was, it allowed me to come up against my own barriers, my own assumptions, my own wounding, and my own desire to control, and desire to things to be right, and desire to work things out with my mind. And that was a real experience in surrender. A really
When I was,
like, how much can I surrender, right?
right. When I was a kid, I was raised in a very stressful and toxic environment. And in my world, that ended up being that was just how I lived life. But I'd watch TV, and on TV, there'd be these sitcoms, Cosby Show. Of course, we all know how that turned out. There'd be all these sitcoms about happy families, and they were able to resolve everything, in a half hour or less. And so I was raised thinking already that I was really crazy and really screwed up, and the rest of the world must be doing pretty good because my life was crazy. So, it's like the sitcoms became a reflection of what I thought the world was like. And so then when I got out, when I got older, I would be blindsided by people because I thought they all were, the Cosby family, or I thought they were all different strokes or whatever it might be. And they weren't. And it was really surprising for me because, like you said, I tried to figure it all out, and when we think that we are smart, when we know we're smart, when we know we're capable, when we know we're empathic, it's very difficult to admit that we are in a situation that is causing so much pain and conflict. Because, like you, we're going to figure it out. We're going to get through this. We're going to solve the problem. It'll be okay. And that was the same attitude I had. And then I found out that the world wasn't the happy family that I thought it was, and that I actually was in a little over my head, and I needed support, and I needed to learn how do you really have connections and relationships with people when a good portion of the world is really self-absorbed. and really dealing with all of these unresolved traumas and pain and challenges. And it comes out, they've been able to sort of float along. You know, I almost think I was lucky because I knew I was screwed up. And because I knew I was screwed up, um, it was like I could problem solve and I could look for answers, and I could get beyond my own, you know, limitations. But there's so many people that they've never gotten to the point where they really have to clean things up. They have to learn how to have relationship skills and social skills, and they have to learn how to get along with other people. And they never did. They just went from relationship to relationship, or, you know, stayed in nasty situations, and nothing ever changed. It totally blew my mind because I always said this growth mindset. You know, I was traumatized. I need to fix myself. We'll figure it out. And it's like the rest of the world isn't like that. They're just like, yeah, life is terrible and this is the way that it is. Really?
It sounds like you had this you had this sort of awareness and sensitivity to realize that looking at different relationships, that you didn't come from this assumption that I know everything, that I'm right about everything. It sounds like you had this beautiful awareness of wow, there's things that we can all learn and skills that we can all learn and improve to have better relationships, which is quite different from someone who comes from a more sort of that end of the spectrum where, let's say, less aware, less self-aware, and, you know, feels that they're right all the time and they have nothing to learn. I mean, that's a huge deal, isn't it? When we're dealing with people who think they have nothing to learn. And fact is, we're all human. None of us are perfect. And I found that is one of the biggest things for me that is a red flag for me, is when I meet people who aren't willing to admit that they are imperfect, and have that openness and willingness to learn. You know, it seems like a big deal for people like that. And I love this amazing quote by T.S. Eliot, which I'm sure you heard, and he said, a lot of harm is done in the world by people who refuse to think ill of themselves. And that just was very profound for me when I heard that the first time. And I'm not talking about because I've heard other people, you know, and this is not about having a low self-esteem. This is not about thinking, oh, I'm unworthy and I have nothing to give, because that's not true either. That's just like flipping over, you know, that's the black and white thinking that comes up, where it's, you know, either or thinking, you know, either I'm everything and I know everything and I'm right all the time, or I know nothing and I have nothing to give, you know, and that's not what we're talking about. You know, we're talking about that healthy in the middle balance, where we all have gifts, we all have strengths to contribute, we all have amazing experiences, our unique personalities, and we're all on this journey of discovering, you know, more of who we are, discovering more about the world, improving and figuring things out along the way, you know, and developing and growing in relationship with other people. Is that something you
know, I was going to say that, you know, so I've stayed connected and close to a number of people who really they come from a very self-absorbed place, and in those times when we're really able to communicate, you know, when they're able to let their guard down and start telling, you know, really speaking more of their truth, one of the things that keeps coming out is that they say that they feel so fragile. You know, so the narcissists that I know, they come from a place of feeling so fragile and so on edge all the time that they feel that this is the only way to protect themselves. This is, you know, that they've got to do this. If they don't do this, that they'll go crazy, and they don't have the resilience to try things and learn, because it means you'd have to fail. You know, it
Yeah.
means you'd have to listen to criticism. You'd have to listen to other people's opinions. And that fragile mindset of thinking that, you know, they could break any, which, you know, when you get broken by a narcissist over and over and over, you realize you've got lots of resilience. You know, you realize your strength. It brings us through that. And we have the, you know, the self-esteem, you know, we develop it because when you're knocked down over and over, you start to learn how to stand back up again. And a lot of narcissists, I don't know how often that they've really allowed themselves out of their comfort zone to realize that, you know, they don't have to behave this way. But,
Yes.
you know, behave they do because that's the safest route for them to go.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it speaks to that rigidity. You know, people, if they're super rigid, you know, again, it's that, you know, healthy people, you know, yes, we have principles. I'm including myself in that. We have principles and things that we won't stand, you know, we won't budge on. You know, things that we value, things that we love, things that we're committed to. Things like decency, kindness, honor, integrity. You know, um, and so those are the things that sort of I feel like we can sort of stand fast in and say, well, I'm immovable in that. Um, but there are other things in life that we need to be sort of go with the flow and more less rigid about that. You know, and one of the things I've noticed is in my experience of people who are more controlling is things have to be a certain way, and there's that, I feel like that's where that rigidity comes in. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like same thing with what you just mentioned, you know, there's this rigid way of thinking, like, you've got to hold it together. It's very rigid, and I can't let go, and I can't mess up, and I can't have a messy life when life is so messy.
Right.
You know,
Right.
yeah, and there's this massive, as you pointed out, there's this massive fear of failure, fear of looking, being humiliated and embarrassed. And for me, when I hear you talk about that, it just almost evokes this sort of compassion in me, because that must be a really horrible way to live.
Right.
If you're constantly afraid of making mistakes and
Mm-hmm. And
constantly afraid.
you can't have good relationships with anybody. You know, you wonder why everything, you know, doesn't work out, why you always fail. You know, but as much as compassion as I have, what I've really realized is that first and foremost, I have to have compassion for myself. I have to recognize and realize that I need to make sure I do the things that keep me healthy and keep me balanced and stable. So what made you realize that you were in an unhealthy relationship?
Okay, good question. So again, coming from this very intellectualized person who I'm like kind of driven and wanted to achieve a lot and study and learn, when I realized was nothing I tried was working, like nothing. Nothing I knew from any arena. I was trying every strategy, and actually, that's the thing that kept me stuck, if I'm quite honest. That constant
Mm-hmm.
struggling to try to make it work one more time, constantly that repeating pattern of this time it'll work, I'm going to try this, you know, that constant struggle is what I experienced.
Like a
That,
problem that you want to solve. You're like, I will solve this. I will figure it out. And it keeps
yeah,
us in that mind and not from getting really good support, which is what for me starts to, you know, move me out of that victim.
absolutely, you're so right. And I actually feel like I'm wondering if, you know, people, women or men, who, because men and women both experience this, it's that like that actual desire to that overachiever, that desire to I'll figure it out. I've always been able to figure something out. Of course, we can find solve a problem, but the problem is the only thing we can control in life is ourselves, and even that we have limited control and power over. And so when when I try all these millions of strategies, and then I realized brick wall after brick wall after brick wall, I was dealing with someone who was not bringing that same openness and willingness to change and wanting to resolve it to the relationship as I was. I just couldn't figure it out, you know, and I reached my own limits of my intellectual, you know, my own pride of, oh, I think I can figure this out. And I just like really hit a brick wall. And I was looking online, trying to find some sort of information that would explain the madness that I was going through, the denial, the gaslighting, the lying, um, you know, all the stuff that was going on, the drama, the triangulating, all the drama and the pain. And I really couldn't understand because I was super committed to making this work. Super, super committed. And again, I think that really kept me stuck because I didn't know to look for these red flags. So finally, I went online and I read about this thing called narcissism, and there's just like a whole nother world. And it's very scary, you know, it really, really is scary. And you know, especially when you're learning about something new, like it's just the amount of information, like you were saying, the amount of information that's available online is so overwhelming. You know, it can be really overwhelming. And that's when I got myself into support. Counseling is amazing. Therapy, talk therapy, coaching. I've invested in coaching. Um, and that has been really amazing. And of course, and I think the big difference here when we're talking about self-care, Rita, is the difference between like where my focus was. So during the relationship, and I think this is really key and really important, during the relationship, my focus was on trying to fix the relationship by myself, trying to fix and help and change them, and trying to find different strategies so that we could cooperate in this relationship and we could be happy. And the real difference started, and I've also noticed in a lot of online groups and narcissist sort of abuse recovery programs for narcissism, that you know a lot of the focus can be in the initial stages on them, like what they've done wrong, all about them. You know, when you're delving into anything like or learning all about narcissism, and then we can sometimes fail to take that amazing focus and energy and turn that in on ourselves.
Right. It's almost like an obsession, isn't it? Where we obsess about what the other person's thinking, how they're going to respond, what can we do next, what's our next strategy, how's it going to work, you know, how should I respond to that? And we put all of this energy focus on trying to manage their emotions, which aren't manageable because the reason they're being emotional is for their very own personal reasons, and not at looking at what can I do that will make me feel grounded and stable and calm and back into my center. You know, we won't sleep, we'll spend, you know, hours, we'll skip things that we need to be doing, you know, in arguments, we won't, you know, get the priorities done because of this obsession. And when you're absolutely spot on, when we start to obsess not about the other person, but about what can I do that will make me feel the best that I can feel, because that's how I can handle it. That's what I can do. I can do the things that nourish and nurture me and make me strong, so that then I can decide, do I want to stay? Do I want to go? You know, are they too far along the narcissism spectrum and I have to, you know, cut them off, or is it, you know, are they wounded and just need some support in processing through, you know, what's going on, and can I be the person that helps them through that? Those are all questions people have to ask themselves, you know, if they're going to have if they find themselves in a toxic relationship like that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I want to, and I think you've highlighted such an amazing point in that, you know, we sort of as you say, we're trying to control the other person's reactivity, like sort of trying to figure out how we can cooperate and achieve things, you know, like whether it's just basic things every day or events or anything that can happen, just normal life, and you have this unexpected drama, you know. You're so right. The focus is on them. And for me, my reaction was all about like how unfair it was, how wrong it was, you know, how things were ruined, you know, events or anything like, you know, the effort that you make. And you just feel so unappreciated and unacknowledged. And it's like, in this relationship, the only thing that mattered was that person's, their world, their opinion. And so I think that, at that point, I think, whenever we're going in something, I don't think we realize how much power and control we do have in those situations, power to sort of step back and realize we don't need to let somebody else's mood, somebody else's day, somebody else's opinion ruin our health, our stability, our centeredness. That is super powerful. Realizing that we can draw a boundary and actually not allow that person to tell us who we are. Not allow them to make us sort of doubt ourselves. When you start sort of, as you said earlier, like you wonder when you go through all this drama and stuff, you sort of like, the natural thing is to wonder, well, I guess an empathic person is going to go, oh, what have I done wrong? What can I do better? Whereas
right, how can I fix it? What's my part in the responsibility?
Yeah, and we're then in a circle trying to fit around that person and accommodate that person, as opposed to what you were talking about earlier, about, well, what can I do? What's going to make me feel great? And I think that's a fantastic distinction.
That's the number one question. That's the number one question I'll ask myself when I'm feeling conflicted is, what can I do right now that will help me get back into, my centeredness and my groundedness? What can I do that will bring me back to myself? And, and it can look like pretty much anything. When people say self-care, what I always feel, and that what I heard other people, when I talk to them about it, is that self-care is this big giant thing, that it's big, that it's bigger than we can even try, like losing 400 pounds, or it's too much of a cognitive leap to even start doing self-care. And my number one tool for my self-care is saying, what do I need right now? What will help me in this crazy situation? What will help me get back to myself? Do I need to leave? Do I need to eat a snack? Do I need to, block them for a while? Do I need to take a nap? What do I need to do right now to get me back into that centered, rational place? That's like my number one self-care rescue sort of.
I love that so much. And I want to expand that, if I may, a little bit, because I think that is so important, so huge, because you're talking about, okay, you've realized, all right, I'm off track here, I've been triggered, this conversation is not going well, something's happened, there's drama, and you have actually figured out and realized, okay, enough to become and actually ask yourself, what do I need in this moment? And I just want to really slow that down, wonder if we can really slow that down and figure that out, because I don't know if I'd love to hear your experience, but in my experience, being able to slow that whole process down, and just go, hang on a second, actually this is not going well. Like really slowing that down, and I think that's a really good key for me, has been to just really, really slow that down. Take a breath and realize, okay, I've been triggered. Have that awareness, because I think that is so important. If we can even have that awareness, I have been triggered and I'm not in my right mind now, I'm not in my best self, and then have a list of tools, self-care tools to bring us back into the moment, that's amazing. But before we can even go to those tools, whether that is deep breathing, going for a walk, having a cup of tea, exercise, stretching, whatever it is, it's so important to be able to, first of all, take yourself out of that situation, because having the awareness that, whoa, I've been hijacked, my system has been hijacked now, and I'm now in fight and flight, and whatever's going to come out of my mouth is not going to be wholesome and healthy and helpful. That is super important. And I think, you know, in my experience and what I've been reading is that's addictive. Like that wanting to be right and that drama is addictive, you know? The
Well, and
science.
it's addictive for both parties. When I was a kid, I grew up with a lot of a lot of emotion going on, and it wired me to be someone who's comfortable and drawn to, this this high level of experience. When I heard, I know it pretty quick because one of a few things happens. If I if I have an adrenaline dump, then my whole body will shake for like 10-15 minutes and I'll be cold. And my face will look completely still, but, and I'll be rational and reasonable, but my body will be shaking. That's one way I know I'm absolutely triggered. When that happens to me, I'm like, wow, isn't this interesting? Or I'll sob and I'll cry so much and I'll be like, yeah, this is interesting. And there's a little bit of, you end up feeling kind of alive when you have those big chemical releases in your system. It takes you to kind of a level of awareness and aliveness that that's really tricky. And you kind of have to get to the point where you say, you know what, this is good and this is fun, to be like, wow, look at that, my whole body's shaking. But eventually, you're like, no, because now I have to spend 4 or 5 days recovering, from this dramatic adrenaline release.
Absolutely.
And so it's very, it can be very attractive. We love how it makes us feel until it makes us feel, way too wiped out. At least for me, because I grew up in that sort of situation.
Absolutely, I can so relate to that. And I think what you've mentioned is so super important as well, because it sounds like you and I are maybe similarly wired, where we're like, you have this adrenaline rush, you've got the cortisol, the norepinephrine, all those hormones that like gear us up for a fight and to really meet life's challenges. But not everyone is like that. I know people who they freeze, and this is like the worst thing. They're really afraid of confrontation. So when there's any difference or confrontation, people like, so you've got the fight, flight, freeze, flop friend, right? You've got all these different personalities and ways that this can look for different people, but it's still the fight or flight response. So some people will freeze in the moment, and it's like the science is showing how those memories and that trauma get trapped in the muscle. Those memories get trapped in the cell memory. And then there's the fight, obviously, where people are like, yeah, maybe A-type personality, or where you're gearing up and you're ready, you can meet the challenge. And so in those circumstances, like the vision sharpens, you get focused. That's what that stress response does. Is it's there to help us survive, right? And so, but it's different for everybody. So for some people, that's why some people get super critical and highly focused and hyper, vigilant and alert and aware. And then there's the friend response, which is like, okay, let's do the friendly we're trying to befriend the enemy. And then and then there's the flop, right? So a lot of people say, well, after the fact, after they've calmed down, or after all those hormones have washed out of their body, they're like, either like, why do they say that? It just came out of my mouth. I don't know if you've had experience like that. It's wow. And then, or why didn't I say anything in the moment? If you look at what's going on in the world with Me Too and people who are assaulted and raped and hurt, there are people who just like froze in the moment, and they kick themselves for it, and they're so super judgmental, and they like wonder, why didn't I do something? Why didn't I run? Why didn't I scream? Why didn't I say something? But you know what? It's not something that's conscious. It's an automatic, instinctual process. And again, all of these things really invite us to have compassion for ourselves.
Right.
Yeah.
And when someone has childhood trauma, and I was just reading about this today, dissociation. That was one of the things I struggled with for a long time. And I still do at times, is where I disassociate from a situation. And when trauma happens when we're children, and trauma is considered, I was reading about that too, trauma is considered anything that happens that we were unable to really process through and feel and think through at the time, you know, or soon after. And when we can't process it through, it becomes a trauma for the body. And when we've got these traumas as a kid, because our personality isn't quite developed, you know, at least for me, I developed the coping mechanism of just disassociating. You know, when something would happen, I would just leave my body. You know, I'd leave the experience. And that's a really tough one to get over too. You know, how do you stay present when you really, you know, just want to check out and not pay attention to anything? And so that was one of the struggles I had to get over, is how do I actually stay present when I could just disassociate? You know, it would be like, well, I could just take, you know, drugs and then it would all be better. But it's still there when you come back.
We have, and I think it's fantastic that you know what your pattern is. We all have a pattern. You know, some people leave, some people spin and dissociate and procrastinate, and they're, again, as you said, they're not present. We all have these different patterns. Some people go into battle, you know, want to solve and fight the problem and resolve the challenge. Other people go up into their heads and just think, okay, we'll become super detached and logical about it and just, you know, remain cold and objective, and try and analyze things, you know, and solve the problem logically like that. And then other people sort of go into this emotional meltdown, right, where it's like there's just a lot of tears and emotion and drama. So we all have these different patterns, and again, it's useful. It's, again, I think it's gold dust. It's good for us to know what our pattern is and to notice when we're going into those patterns, and then come back to that beautiful question you asked earlier about, okay, so I'm noticing that something's going on for me here. I don't know what it is, but being able to observe that and say, that's interesting, you know, what's going on, investigate, and what do I need? You know, what do I need right now?
Mm-hmm. Sometimes I need to let myself be whatever emotion that I'm feeling, you know, because in my body, as I said, I'll get the adrenaline dump, or I'll sob uncontrollably, you know, or I'll pee myself. That's absolutely been an option in my life. And there's this very physical response. And when we try to cover that up, when we try to push it back down, that's what causes a lot of problems health-wise. But when I let myself, you know, not feel ashamed or not feel guilty or not feel bad or not feel manipulative, even though, you know, the narcissist will like to say you're using your tears to manipulate the situation. You know, when I just let myself experience my emotions in the moment, it means that actually on the other side of the argument, I can come back so much better. I can get over it, you know, because I'm like, I had an emotional detox. And so I'm just okay with whatever I'm feeling in the moment, no matter if it looks bad or, you know, it could be ridiculed. I don't care. I'm just going to be present with it so it doesn't end up locked in and making me sick later on.
I think that is so profound, Rita. That is so profound. You know, so many people judge themselves and are critical on themselves and harsh on themselves, and then feel guilty for having emotions and for needing to cry, you know. And I think it's profound that you've been able to, that is profound, that you're able to allow it, just allow that and accept your emotions and reactions as they can. We're not saying, you know, like, no one's putting that on anybody else. But that is a healthy way of containing your emotions by noticing, okay, I'm going through that, and I'm not going to judge myself for whatever it is that I need to cope in the situation. And I think that is an example of profound self-care.
So when you first started to discover that you might be in a toxic relationship with, where the rules were entirely different than, you know, the 30-minute sitcom at 7:30 at night, what did you start what did the coaching and the therapy and the other things, what did they bring to you in terms of self-care? What parts and pieces did they start to help you get into place?
Quite a lot. I think it's quite a lot. There's a lot of pieces. So I really want to make this as valuable as possible. So the thing that came to me was, number one, build in a sort of a daily ritual of time for self-care. So that's number one. Making it a priority. We can talk about why these things happen, and not blaming, but looking at how we don't want to allow ourselves to be hurt or open ourselves up to unhealthy relationships. And one of the ways to do that is by prioritizing ourselves and by prioritizing self-care. So for example, creating a ritual, a non-negotiable ritual in the calendar, like it's so important. As you said earlier, when we are so giving, we're giving to other people to the point of sacrifice, where we're at our own expense, then that's an unhealthy balance, right? Giving is a great thing and being generous is amazing. But when we start to, it's at our own expense and it's detrimental to our own health and well-being, then that is a lie. That means we're not taking proper care of ourselves. We don't have healthy boundaries, physical, emotional, mental boundaries. And so that's number one. Number one is it's got to be like if you had a client or a doctor's appointment, it's just non-negotiable. Like you won't break that for anything. That's your time. Mm-hmm. Every day that you take time for you to think about your priorities, your values, who you want to be, do things that fill you up and fuel you and that are pleasurable. I think pleasure is a huge self-care thing, because pleasure has so many benefits. It changes our hormones, the balance of chemicals in our system, it changes our focus. Pleasure is huge. So number one, non-negotiable commitment to self-care. Again, you mentioned the word obsessing earlier. Being vigilant with ourselves and taking control and responsibility of ourselves. So about what's going on up here, like what are we thinking now? If we're spending 95% thinking about somebody else and what they're going to be doing and how, then we know that we're out of balance. And bringing that back to what I can focus on, what are my thoughts, what am I going through, what are my priorities. So number one, self-commitment to your own health and well-being is super essential. Like it's a non-negotiable. It's got to be that is a deal breaker. It's just got to be non-negotiable. Then like really thinking, like taking notice, like whether you meditate or you use mindfulness, becoming really aware of what's going on up here. Like what's this environment like? If our bodies and our hearts and minds and souls are gardens, what can grow in there? Is this a beautiful hothouse full of nutrients and positivity and well-being, or are we creating an environment and a cocktail of sort of disease and toxicity? Like what's really taking responsibility and accountability for what's going on here? So taking the focus off that person and back onto ourselves and taking responsibility. Pleasure, what you said earlier, like what do I need and what's going to make me feel great? And again, we're not saying that's just not about like, okay, I'm going to go on a shopping spree, and soothe myself that way, or do anything else that's unhealthy and just replace that behavior. This is about taking actions that are going to be healthy actions, things like investing in ourselves, taking time out, having these self-care tools like breathing, taking deep grounding breaths. Everyone has a different way of feeling grounded, like whether it's walking in nature, journaling, meditation, mindfulness. I love all of those. Those work really well for me. Reading is pretty awesome. Getting a good night's sleep, the basics that we all know, but we don't always do. getting enough water every day, eating healthy meals, stopping obsessing about the other person, and really being the generating force in your own life.
Mm-hmm. One of
Stop
the
waiting. Yeah.
mm-hmm. One of the things that um, one of the things that always got in the way of me doing self-care was we're kind of brainwashed to believe that we don't deserve self-care, that we should be above self-care. Somehow we should be able to do everything and be everything. And if we need to do something to get grounded, or that makes us feel good or treats us well, then it means that we're weak. You know,
And self.
we've been trained to think that caring, you know, making sure you get your needs met and that you're nourished means that you're weak, that you're stupid, that you don't have everything pulled together. And the opposite is true. You know, the women who have everything pulled together are the ones, like you said, who make rituals and self-care and pleasure non-negotiable. You know, we say there's nothing that's going to get in the way of me doing this. And those are the women that are able to really break out of those situations because you get the resources, you get the health, you know,
Yeah.
you get your inflammation down. So now you look at the narcissist and you're kind of like, really? That's what you're bringing into the table? You're crazy. You know, we don't get as hijacked by it. So
Yeah.
we tend to think that we have to do it all by ourselves, and that if we, you know, do things that make us feel good, that we should feel guilty about it because it
Yeah.
means that we're not strong enough and that we haven't earned it. And if we would just be more thoughtful and sensitive, maybe then we, you know, deserve to take a bath, you know, something like that. It's really, really ridiculous how we've been kind of enslaved, you know, by these beliefs about what a good woman is supposed to look like. And it doesn't include regular baths and nourishing food, you know, and setting boundaries in
Yeah.
the world, you know, in the mental world, construct we've given, we've been told those things, you know, just demonstrate that you're not good at. It's crazy.
Exactly, and where do we learn these things? You know, we learn by example. We don't. No one sits us down and says, "Okay, darling, you're never allowed to take care of yourself. You don't do this." We learn these things by osmosis. By it gets handed to us, you know, by our culture, by our religion, by our environment. We watch how the role models in our life treat themselves, and then we take that on as our sense of value too. You know, where we don't learn to value ourselves and we learn to give our power away. Again, as you say, you know, waiting for someone to give us permission or tell us that we're deserving or good enough, you know. And I think that is one of the most powerful things that I learned in getting support, you know, in counseling and in getting coaching as well over the years, is taking back the power and control in your own life, not asking for permission from other people to live your life, to pursue your goals, to follow your passions and pleasures. Um, Dealing with that inner critic is super important. You know, however anyone can, you know, chooses to do that, that's up to them. You know, mindfulness meditation is, and I do tapping, and I highly recommend it. It's a clinically proven tool that helps you deregulate your nervous system and switch off the fight flight response. So you know, out of all the tools that I use, I highly recommend tapping. You know, since I've been qualified, I just use it all the time, and I've seen it with my clients how powerful it is. This is one of the most powerful tools in the world. Is tapping, emotional freedom technique, or EFT. And so that is a huge tool for me. I have to be honest, that's my go-to that I learned after my coaching. But it's important because it helps you to really separate what's going on in reality in the present moment and what's going on up here, you know, and figuring out, you know, the things that we think, we just get handed to and we never question it. We never question those beliefs, those that lack of value, the lack of worth, the lack of deserving, the waiting for permission. We never question that. No one taught me to question that. I
Well,
learned that.
I remember looking at my mom you know, and
Yeah.
she bent over backwards. You know, she did everything. She never stopped. I mean, it was crazy. And that was passed down generation to generation. I mean, her family was a family of farmers, you know, who worked hard and worked the soil and didn't get a break. And, you know, and that just kept getting passed down. And sometimes we wonder, we say, why do I react this way? Why am I not taking care of myself? Why am I in these relationships? Without recognizing that we were almost shaped or trained to be victims.
Yeah.
You know, that's what we learned. And it was passed down family member to family member that this is what a good woman looks like. And we really have got to start breaking these bonds and
Yeah.
these chains of you know, of thinking that a good woman or a successful woman is someone who doesn't need anything and doesn't need anybody, and that's exactly the opposite. We can't get anywhere if we try to do it by ourselves. And community was one of my biggest tools, because having other people that can, you know, that you can get good thoughts from, you know, that are in your corner and on your side and keep you thinking clearly and are rooting for you. You know, when you find a group of people that have got your back, suddenly you're like, you know what? You're right. I don't need to put up with this anymore. What am I going to do next?
Yeah, that's amazing. And just, that is profound, Rita. That shift from having that aha, that insight and awareness that is possible. That is profound. Having that awareness, I had that too. Like, wow, you don't have to, this is so different. Being in a healthy environment where you can be witnessed, there's no competition. There's not this unhealthy backstabbing, this drama, this passive aggressive behavior, and just realizing that it's possible, the shift is possible to have a better, healthier, there's a better way. That is profound. And you know what? I also want to honor what you say about how we get things passed down to us. And I also want to say that part of that is also recognizing how, I'm just going to take some water, how lucky we are to have all the resources that we have.
Right.
I've just been watching this BBC documentary about science and the story of science. And, it's all the latest inventions were all about the scientific thinking. It's all about machinery. We work with computers, we work with laptops, we work with machines and technology. And there's been this assumption, this worldview where humans are compared to computers. We even have these amazing sci-fi, which I love, where there's this combination between computer technology and human, And so, as you were saying, this idea that you can just keep on going, like a computer can do all these calculations and just keep on going. We're not computers. There's this inherent assumption. A computer or a car can go and all it needs is some gas and oil and a checkup once a year. But we are not machines. We have ebbs and flows. We have like, I don't know exactly how many, but it's fascinating. I love the biology and how the body works. And we have like quite a number of clocks and different rhythms that are happening in our system all the time, and we, as you say, we tend to push through that. We don't, and this is where the mindfulness and meditation comes in, and listening to the wisdom of our body. If we can listen to our body and not push through, we'd never do that with a car. If you're driving with a car on a highway or motorway and you get a flat tire, what we tend to do as human beings is just keep going. I'll just figure it out. I'll sort it out another time. But, we tend to do that with our bodies and take that for granted almost in a way. And sort of like, oh, I'll take care of that later. That gets put to the bottom of the priority list, right? Whereas if we can really lift that up and actually really pay attention and be mindful and become more aware of the wisdom in our bodies, science talks about how our intuition and wisdom is housed in our gut. It's in our bodies, and if we can use that beautiful combination of our intellectual analytical thinking together with that mind-body wisdom of what our body and our sensations and our intuition are telling us. That's where we get the magic, where we can make great decisions, we can think clearly. How many have been in a relationship where we did have red flags, we did have alarm bells go off, but because we're maybe not trained to listen to that, or we're not trained to value that information, we just steamroll right over that. And we lean on our assumptions and go, of course they're going to be a good person. Of course they're going to treat me as lovely as I'm treating them. Of course they're going to bring the respect and the openness and curiosity that I'm bringing. When you make these assumptions, instead of really tuning in and listening to what our bodies are telling us and listening to those red flags and those intuitive hits that go, well, something's off here,
Right. Well, and the more, it's kind of, it's that self-fulfilling prophecy of where, for me, when I get stressed out, I can't eat, right? I can't eat. And when there's all that emotional turmoil, that I'm exhausted, I can't do anything. And so what happens is, because I'm stressed out and I don't eat and I'm tired, now I can't make good decisions. Now my body's inflamed. Now everything hurts. And when our digestion is off, our brain gets inflamed. When our brain's inflamed, it now makes us feel even more vulnerable and sensitive and overreactive, and so it's about the choices that we make. And, when we're in these toxic situations, we tend to make choices which will make us physically feel worse. And then the worse that we feel, the easier it is to manipulate us. So it kind of like fits in that weird little master plan of, if I wear them down, then they'll just do exactly what I tell them to, because they won't have enough energy to break out, and break free. And so starting to say, what, today I'm going to make sure I drink enough water. My psychologist gave me a tip the other day. She says, look at it this way, that when you drink raw water, it protects you from a lot of that emotional nastiness. It protects you from that. And when I thought about it like that, not like, oh, I should drink water because it's good for me, it keeps me hydrated, makes me feel better. When I thought, no, I need to keep these Looney Tunes from sticking to me. And the way I'm going to do it is by making sure I drink my water on a regular basis, so I can be, hey, that's not right. That's not appropriate. So it's a defense, making sure that we're hydrated, that we have the fiber, that, we're taking our anti-inflammatory type stuff, that we're getting our gut in order, and the probiotics means that we start to break out of those bonds, out of the bonds of our own mind and our own beliefs.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. And I think what you said is super important about breaking free from that sort of that pattern, just that repeating pattern. The energy, you said, when they're like, you feel like you're being worn down, hey, it's just like this constant wearing down. That's another sign it's not going anywhere. It's not going well.
That it's more, that it might be more work than you thought. And from now on, now I know, I make sure that I see my psychologist every single week, that I've got lots of close friends in my life, that I do things which are healthy for my body, that I make sure I have a lot of pleasure in my life. And that's what I do to protect myself from a lot of the negativity and a lot of the anger, and the selfishness that is everywhere. It's the best protection I know of, which is to really do things that take me to my highest version of myself.
Yeah.
And when I'm there, then I do everything.
And boundaries for me are huge, like that. Boundaries have been a lifesaver. When when I was, I don't know, was it 20 years old or something, I was lucky enough to go through a boundaries course with a group. And I tell you, that was just, again, mind-blowing and shifted my life in such a big way. And I've just been a massive, passionate, like a kind of a scholar or a learner or a lover of boundaries, because I've seen how valuable they are. But you know what? When you're not in that, when you're not filled and you don't have that energy and that, I don't know if self-esteem is the right word, but it's like you have um, this energy and what's the word I'm looking for?
Is it confidence?
Confidence, yeah. Confidence, energy, sort of maybe self-esteem, wherewithal, and where you not have this constant inner critic of you shouldn't do that, you know, all the shoulda, coulda, wouldas, and you're able to set boundaries that are healthy without feeling guilty, without worrying about consequences, you know, because when you start setting boundaries, people don't like that. When you change, people don't like it when you change. People like you to stay the same way you've always been because that's how they know. It's like a dance, you know, like Harriet Lerner talks about. I love this analogy. Like we're in this dance, and when you change your step, it's like they want you to do the same old dance you've always done. And you are learning new steps for a new dance that's going to be healthier and more supportive for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, being able to set boundaries, learning boundaries, I must say, I think that's been one of the biggest things because I feel safer. I have more, feel like I have more power in myself. Just not like ego tripping power, but just like that. Wow, like I am my own person. This is where I am. That's where that person begins. I don't have to take on, you know, that, their emotions, their anger, and also to be able to take responsibility for my thoughts, my feelings, my behavior, and my actions, because that's all I can really change and control. So boundaries is a massive self-care, huge self-care thing that has helped me tremendously.
Well, it took me forever to really get a handle on what boundaries were, you know, because they always seemed to me to be something. They were a mystery to me. I didn't even know what boundaries meant. And a few years ago, uh, I was talking to a friend of mine, and we are talking about boundaries. And it was boundaries or rules that you set for yourself for the experience that you want to have. It really doesn't have anything to do with the other person. It just says, this is the experience that I want to have. And so I'm not going to allow you to speak to me that way. I'm not going to allow myself to feel upset. And it can change day to day or moment to moment. You know, if I say to myself, I'm not going to allow myself to feel upset. So if something's making me upset, then I'm going to do something, you know, to get myself grounded again. Now you're, you know, confidently walking away from the situation. Now you're, you know, hanging up the phone or not texting because you're saying to yourself, it's not about how do I make the other person do something? How do I make them stop? How do I make them be nice to me? How do I, you know, get them to figure out what the right thing is to do? Now it's, you know what, they're going to be exactly who they are. And my job is to make sure that I don't let them treat me that way. You know, and if that means that I have to leave, that's what I do. And it's neat when you start, you know, telling people, I'm sorry, that's my boundary. Now I need to go. Because you're not playing anymore, because you're not part of, you know, the jitterbug that they're doing, they have to change their behavior so that if they want to keep you around, you know, if they want to keep you in their life, now they have to figure out what to do to make you not walk out of the room or drive away or pick up the phone.
I don't know if I would have been able to set the boundaries that I've set and change the things in my life if I didn't have someone that I could go to, like my coach or a group of people who are super supportive. Because, you know, we don't pop out the room with, here's a manual, here's boundaries, here's how to communicate, here how to resolve conflicts. I wish. If I didn't have my coach and a group of supportive, healthy women around me to cheer me on and for me to bounce ideas and say, well, like that didn't work, this happened, what do I do now? And to manage how I felt about it, because I felt so guilty. You know, you feel guilt, you know, all these things when you set a healthy boundary, which you shouldn't really, but it's, you know, whenever we learn a new skill, you know, it's never going to be perfect the first time and we're going to make mistakes, you know, and being able to manage that. I don't think I would have been able to do that without my coach and being surrounded by positive, supportive, loving people. you know, who were able to be encouraging and not get hooked by their own stuff, because that, I think, is that's what happens in these unhealthy relationships. People don't realize, if you tell someone a story about something that's happening to you, and either they've gone through it themselves, or they've heard it, or they have a judgment about that, they're not going to be able to give you an objective. They're not going to be objective. All their wounding and stuff is going to come out at you.
Right.
It's just going to be a whole, this whole projection thing. So, you get hurt, it's all this stuff. And it's basically because they're not able to separate, okay, that's them, this is me. Even, for example, Rita, if you and I go through the exact same thing, the exact same experience, we'll have different, if the exact same thing happened, we'll have different experiences. So, and without having that amazing non-judgmental support, I don't think I would have been able to be strong and learn to be so solid in myself and in my boundaries and feel grounded with that, instead of going into that negative spiral of feeling guilty and that inner critic of, why did I do that? I shouldn't have done that. And try and then again get back into that dance.
Right. But see, we have to actively, at least for me, I had to actively look for healthy people, because, as you said, if somebody still has their own judgment around it or fear around it, and a lot of people do, but they've got their own unresolved traumas, then you share with them. And this happened to me actually as a kid. When I was growing up, I was under a tremendous amount of stress, and I was emotionally isolated. And one day when I was like 9 or 10, I went to my grandmother, who lived a couple hours away. We were happy to be visiting her. She didn't know me very well. I didn't know her very well. We saw each other like twice a year. And I said to her, I'm having a really difficult time in my family. And because it was she couldn't look at it. She minimized it and brushed it off, and, oh, you're taking it too seriously. Or even when I had problems when I was older and I went to a doctor and I was like, hey, I'm having this problem. While relationships are hard, you just need to work harder at them. And so we have to really seek out and develop relationships with healthy people. And a lot of times the healthiest people are in the business. We are the coaches, we are the psychologists, a lot of unhealthy people too. But, I always found I have a better chance to find somebody who's got their head on straight and can be present and helpful to me if they're already in the business somehow. And I'm like, yeah, I'll pay for it, because there aren't enough people who can be that good of friends, that can really be that solid, because they just have so many of their own issues they're still working through.
Absolutely, and that's why I'm such a great believer and stickler for. I do my own work as well. When I'm a coach, but I do my own work. I'm constantly doing my own work. I'm constantly looking at myself and trying to get healthier, as healthy as possible. And I'm a firm believer, I won't work with anyone. I won't pay anyone. Doesn't matter how good they are, if they're not also invested in doing their own work. They don't necessarily need to be in therapy, but someone who's done a lot of work is usually a really good bet. If they don't have their own coach at the moment or whatever, but it'll be someone who has done their own, like the coaches I can think of that I've worked with, they did their own work. They did their own work, and they're constantly, again, coming back to that openness and willingness to learn, and that sense of like, yes, I have this experience and I have this expertise and I can help you. And I'm also, making sure we don't, because we all have blind spots.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I guess it helps that we love learning, doesn't it? We love learning.
Yeah. So, I mean, when I think about relationship and work, for a long time, I really didn't know what that meant, or that you have to do your own work. You have to do your own healing work. And what that meant to me was, this is a lot of work. feeling things and crying or being aware or not defending yourself or setting boundaries, they use up a lot of energy. They use up a lot of focus. And if to go through the process of feeling emotions that you've suppressed for decades, of working through the beliefs that keep you trapped in how you feel, that's exhausting. It's a lot of work to heal ourselves. But I've also found that my life has gotten better and better and better and happier and more peaceful and more grounded. So it's like you have to put the work in with some faith on the front end. Like, I don't think this is going to work and this is really hard and I don't like this too much. Then you start to find as you do it, then you feel better. Your body doesn't feel so much. You're not so tired. The people around you aren't so, they aren't trying to get so much from you, and it's a better balance of give and take.
Absolutely agree with you. I will say that, yeah, we've all been there, where we think, oh, if I start crying now, maybe it'll never end. Maybe I'll just have this river of tears and it'll just be never ending. If after we've held stuff in for so long, it can feel like that. We can have that fear that, well, if I let go now, I've been holding things together for so long, maybe I'll just be a puddle and I won't be able to achieve everything that I want to achieve and be so functional. But like you, I found, doing the work, I came across tons of uncried grief that I didn't know I even had. But you know what? On the other side of that is joy. Pure joy, lightness, just again, more possibility and belief in what's possible. And I just think that is really priceless. That feeling of joy. And like looking around and going, you know what? It's been so long or whatever, and things are calm. You have this like resilience, as you said earlier, just resilience, and instead of getting stuck in these repeating drama cycles, can actually take that focus and think, what do I want? What do I want to create?
Mm-hmm.
What, again, back to pleasure. It's an incredible antidote for a lot of things.
Yes.
What can I create? What experiences do I want to have? Because life is
breaking out of the pain and anger and numbness, and you start looking towards a future because you've got the power to create it. And that's part of the way that toxic people and narcissists kind of keep us stuck in that pattern, is because we don't think it'll ever get better. That this is it, and no matter where I go or what, it's going to be the same thing no matter where I go. But there are really better jobs. There really are more balanced, functional people out there. And when you become somebody who is just as functional and just as healthy, that's when you find them.
Yeah.
When you're stuck in that pain, then you look like a mess and people really don't want anything to do with you.
Yeah, and you know what? You mentioned something about struggle. Like we can get used to the struggle and thinking that it's going to be hard. That old chestnut. Oh, relationships are hard. Just work harder. And actually, that's what kept me stuck in that relationship. Well, I've just got to work harder. I'll just try better. And I've really been playing with recently. I'm open to it being easy.
Right.
Because that's one of the vows that we make. One of those beliefs, those limiting beliefs that we inherit, is that it's got to be hard. We get addicted to the struggle,
right.
Addicted to pain. It shows that our body, it gets addicted to the pain. We get the same trauma bonding, So it's like when we're in that situation and we're triggered, our whole system is hijacked. And it's like an addiction.
Sure.
And to come off that addiction and replace that with healthy things and things that we want to create. So, example, instead of having this adrenaline rush, okay, I feel alive, I can solve the challenge, I'm rising to the occasion, like using that now that we know what our pattern is, challenging that into something, channeling it into something positive. Okay, so for example, like, is it going on roller coasters? Is it going on adventurous hiking? You know, taking the things that we know about ourselves, having this healthy self-awareness, and so, okay, if I like to feel like that, how can I do that and be intentional about that and create that in a way that's positive and healthy? You know, is it doing adventure sports, or, you know, challenging ourselves to something else? And, you know, I think bringing it back to, I'm open to it being easy, you know, that we don't have to be addicted to the struggle and the pain.
Right.
You know, and
Right. You know, at first, when I first started getting to Native American spirituality, there was the part of me that would say, you know, okay, I want to work through this. I want to heal this. I want to push hard. And then after, you know, you get difficult experiences, you start to learn that you need to ask for it to be as graceful and easy as possible. You know, I don't want to work this hard in order to get along with people. I don't want to do that. I want it to come easy. I want it to come natural. And when you start thinking that way, your mind starts looking for solutions to that. You know, when you start adding those, you know, those little addendums, like, I don't only want to get fixed, I want to get fixed in the most pleasurable, easy, wonderful way possible. And when you start thinking that way, then you start problem solving and coming up the ways that that will work. We don't have to do things in the most painful way to justify anything, you know, or to feel like we struggled so hard. I thought about worthiness the other day, and I was actually thinking about other people who had businesses, and a friend of mine, Tara from Australia, was on the other night. And she was talking about Hugh Hefner, and she was talking about how he was a complete narcissist and a control freak, and, you know, and the women who kind of broke out of that. And I was thinking to myself about worth. Oh, you know, maybe I'm not worthy to have a really big, successful business. And then I thought, wait, Hugh Hefner was a complete jerk. He didn't deserve to have all of the success and you know, wonderfulness that he had in his life. He didn't, quote unquote, deserve that. So that's a terrible benchmark for us to say that we're worthy or we deserve to have things good in our life, because plenty of people who by our standards are super undeserving, you know, are getting the things that make them happy, that make them successful. So we can't let whether we're worth it or not get in our way, because because that's just not how the world works. It doesn't matter whether you're worthy or not. It matters whether you know, have enough resources coming in that you can be the highest version of yourself that you can.
yeah, and I think what you're saying is absolutely profound, because just even having that awareness to question that thought that says, I'm not worthy, I don't deserve, that is incredibly huge. That is a huge, powerful, you know, some people say quantum leap, that's a massive shift. Having that awareness, and, you know, you can use that, you increase your self-awareness, because awareness is always the first step in any change, any tool that you like and you prefer. But you know, mindfulness is brilliant because it really helps us to notice what's going on, and meditation is really excellent for that too. And tapping again, I'm not ashamed to say tapping. You know, being able to actually really, really be aware, number one, of those negative thoughts like, I don't deserve it, or I'm not good enough, or haven't worked hard, or not yet. You know, maybe one day the ship will come in, and replace that with a positive affirmation or a positive thought. You know, like, I'm open to it being easy, or I'm releasing pain and struggle in my life. I love that's Carol Tuttle affirmation, releasing pain, struggle, and suffering. I really
Giving
like that.
ourselves giving ourselves permission to think positive thoughts, to like ourselves, to find qualities that we enjoy about ourselves. That's a really important part of self-care. You know, when we look in the mirror, and even if we read a little sticky note that says, you know, because I'm alive, because I was born, it means that I have value.
Absolutely.
Even just saying those thoughts and starting to rewire our brain and rewire our thinking patterns is a wonderful self-care, because now we're nourishing that spiritual sort of part of ourselves that needs those positive thoughts, that needs to feel like we're worthy and have value, and that we can be.
Yeah. Absolutely, and not just spiritually, like mentally as well. I think that's there's this interesting study, and I think it's worth mentioning because some people, it's about how we get ourselves to perform and do well in life. And there's this interesting study, and I was actually talking to a friend of mine who was really sick, really sick recently. And we talked about inner critic and stuff like that before, and she's like, "Oh, I'm fine." But then when she got ill, she said, "Oh, I'm so hard on myself. I'm so hard on myself, and I'm so impatient with myself, and I'm so sick of being sick, and I just want to get better." And I was like, opportunity moment here. And I just wanted to, be loving. And I think that's where being authentic and being loving in relationships and having healthy boundaries is, in the past, I wouldn't say anything because I wouldn't want to upset anybody. But because I love this person and I care about them, I was willing to be honest and take a risk and say, you know what? Is that healthy? How does that make you feel?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
I had a friend who would recognize that around them were a lot of negative people. They worked in a very negative environment where anger and frustration, that was perfectly acceptable to go and kind of minimize and belittle. And so they decided to do an experiment. When someone came out and started kind of pointing and spitting at them and, and yelling, they yelled back. And then after a few, and met them toe to toe. And after a few minutes, they said, "Now, is this the way that we want to do things? Is this the way that we want to communicate and relate to one another?" When we care about somebody, I think it's important to recognize that they're struggling. It doesn't mean that we have to give everything to them. It doesn't mean that we have to sacrifice ourselves. But when someone's struggling, and they don't know why they don't have good relationships, they don't know why they can't get along with people, it's usually because nobody ever really told them, except maybe in the heat of battle, when they were in the middle of the fight. When you care about somebody, you want to let them know things that they can do, how they affect you, how they affect the people around them. And by saying something, to me, is the greatest act of caring. I had a close friend of mine who had children, had been estranged from their children, and now their children were adults, but they had a lot of anger and frustration. One day, they had a big meltdown, a big blow up on my phone. And my friend looked at it like this. They were grateful that that their child felt comfortable and safe enough to express all of that pain and all of that anger that they were going through. So they didn't take any of it personally. They were just so glad that the communication had started. And so when we talk to people that we care about, it's important to communicate to them about how they're affecting the people around them, because otherwise they're going to stay trapped for the next 10, 20, 30 years.
I also think that, in an ideal situation, if we can train ourselves, if we really ask ourselves, what do I want to get out of the situation? Do I, just want to blow up? Do I want the relief of sharing my emotions? Okay. Or what's my goal here? Do I actually want to have a resolution and a healthy relationship? If we can slow down and really ask ourselves, like, imagine and visualize, how do we want it to go? Because blowing up, I'm glad that in that situation, the person was able to step back and not take that personally, although that must have been painful, and say, wow, I'm glad that, that's incredibly compassionate. But I don't think, that's not the ideal situation, is it? The ideal situation would be able to be if both parties, or however many people, are able to speak in a way that the other person can hear them, you know, and communicate so that they're representing themselves in the best way possible, that there's honoring to themselves. I had to, when I said to myself, this is who I want to be in conflict situations, that's who I really am. For example, if I want to be kind, I want to be patient, I want to be considerate, even in conflicting, I want to be generous, even if someone's not being generous with me. Those are decisions that we get to make about who we want to be in those heated situations. And I think if we're hijacked in that fight flight, we can't really be those people that we want to be. And that person can't really hear what we have to say. And it kind of defeats the purpose. So, ideally, a healthy way of dealing with would be for that child to go and process their emotions first. So whether that's write a letter that you're never going to send and burn it, or journal, or talk to someone safe, or whether it is going to take up a boxing class, like whatever it is, to first process and first tap. For me, I'd recommend tap it out. Do use EFT, use emotional freedom technique. Tap, so that you're not coming to this conversation with this massive charge and this massive energy and this massive expectation for that other person to behave in any sort of way. You can come to the conversation in a calm, cool, collected way where you're detached from the outcome and you're committed to being your best self, like showing up with, the values and so what happens is when you're able to do that in a relationship and have a conversation, you are honoring yourself and you're honoring that other person as well, regardless of how they act. You can always look back at that and you don't feel shame of how it went, and you don't have to feel guilt, because you know that you've acted in your own best interests, regardless of how they act. It'll still be painful if they, cause drama, but I think I like to be able to live with myself, I like that feeling. I like the feeling of being able to be okay with myself. Like, yeah, that didn't go the way I wanted it to go. I would have loved it to have a different, better outcome, but I did my best.
Right.
I like the feeling of not having to feel shame and guilt,
I think it's important to, to fortify yourself sometimes ahead of time so that you can stay in that place. So if I know that something's going to be a little bit more difficult, that's when I start breaking out, my herbal tea. That's when I start getting out my chamomile and, and my lavender oil. And that's when I start doing the things to fortify me. Typically, I think what people do is they wait until they feel damaged and then try to fix how they feel. But we've got so many natural tools out there that, it's like if you use the tools first to get yourself into a good, grounded, balanced place, now you can, ask for the raise or address the situation or stand up to the coworker, or, whatever it may be, because you fortified yourself first so that you would stay out of the fight or flight, so that you would stay in a place of being present. Because when we're hijacked by that, then, it's like all bets are off. Yeah. So I sometimes tell women they need to get mad before they're really mad. Because if you're going to wait until you're so mad that you're going to walk away, I hear women telling me about their divorces and how, like, I just wanted to get rid of these people. I just wanted to get them out of my life. And so I gave them everything, and I let them take it. And because I just wanted it to be done. And recognizing that, when you're in a place of fight or flight, you are not in your best self, and you're going to make decisions which you're going to regret later on because they're coming from just trying to stem the pain. So keeping ourselves agile by not letting ourselves go into that panic mode.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And you know what, that really speaks to me of when you know you're not having good boundaries and you're not setting boundaries if you feel resentful.
Mm-hmm.
The minute you start feeling resentful or unappreciated, they don't appreciate me. Look at everything I've done, offer everything I've done for them.
Right.
You know, giving is not coming from this I'm going to selfless giving place. You're giving, expecting something in return. And
Mm-hmm.
B, set a boundary. You haven't gone, you know what? This is how much I'm doing, and I need time for me. And I've given enough, and I'm now going to go have fun. And I'm going to go play.
Right.
You know, that's a great sign to know boundaries. You need to set some boundaries. And where's my giving coming from? Am I giving, from this place of expectation, wanting something in return, or am I giving because I'm truly giving? And I think that's really important to me.
Right.
Yeah, because we know when we're in relationships, when we're giving, and you just can feel the strings attached. I don't know if you've ever had that experience, and it
Mm-hmm.
just doesn't feel like a true gift, you know.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And yeah, and I notice in myself if I ever start feeling resentful, I'm like, yes,
Right. That's your
boundary.
cue. That's your cue that you're not doing good enough self-care too. I pay a lot of attention to my own feelings, either guilt or resentment or whatever. And I've come to realize that a lot of my emotions are a reflection of my physical self. And so when I'm feeling sad, I'll be like, "Oh, am I a little dehydrated? Is that why I'm feeling sad?" When I'm feeling anxious, I'm like, "Did I have too much salt?" And I start recognizing that my moods are a reflection of something bigger that's going on. And
I love
when I
I
do
love
that,
that
that
curiosity
control.
you have.
Mm-hmm.
I love the curiosity that you have. I love that you're able to go, did I have enough water today, or did I have too much salt? I love that. I think it's a beautiful process. Slowing down to be able to be curious instead of
Mm-hmm.
jumping.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's taken me decades. I mean, I tell people that I've been working on this stuff since, my entire life. And so what happens is, you know, I, I I started to realize many years ago that my trauma as a kid was one of my biggest gifts because it started me on this path of self-reflection, of making better choices, of getting into a good space, of really sorting these things out so that by the time, decades later, it's like, yeah, I'm okay. I can handle this. I'm doing all right. Whereas a lot of people who maybe had bad experiences or narcissists in their life, but didn't have something they could hang their hat on to say, yes, this happened to me. You never really, you're always able to kind of skate by without needing to figure out why you feel so terrible or why, because you're able to just sort of stave it off until you're older, and then like your friend, you get really sick, or it turns into some disorder. So, you
Yeah.
know, a lot of women didn't have the opportunity to have decades to process through these and come to these insights or epiphanies about, oh, my anger is related to the fact that I'm not digesting things and I ate dinner too late. You're not able to make that connection just because people haven't had enough time to make that connection. They haven't needed to put all that work in. And so that's part of my job, is to be like, hey, I'm gonna make these connections for you. You're feeling sad. How much water did you drink today? You're feeling angry. Did you take your probiotic?
It's so important, and I love that you start with the body as well. I think that's it, and it's part of actually one of the other thing that I haven't mentioned yet, the biggest part of self care, huge, profound, that I learned from my coaches and support is being able to parent yourself,
Yes.
being able to sort of say, okay, because we all go through life and we go through this experience, and some people may say, I had an incredible childhood and it was amazing, it was all wonderful, and there was nothing wrong with it. And then you have other people who went, yeah, it was touch and go, it was difficult, there was difficulties. And regardless of that, you get to a point where you just have to realize you can't continue to blame, whether that's your parents or partners or the narcissist or someone who's super controlling, some external circumstance, and be able to then just decide, okay, create that for yourself. So then, okay, great. So when I'm triggered, what do I need? Asking yourself that. That's just incredibly powerful. Being able to say, I don't need someone else to meet my needs. I don't need XYZ or some external force or person to make me feel happy.
Mm-hmm.
To be able to generate that and just love your own company.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's just not effective, and that's what I see a lot coming into my office, is helping me help women realize it's as justified and self-righteous and perfect as it may be to go in there guns blazing. It's not really very efficient or effective. It's like you and I, where we sat there trying to intellectualize everything, what's going on, what does this mean, how do I solve it, maybe if I turn left, maybe if I turn right, what if I go up, what if I go down. That's a very inefficient way to solve these problems. But when we come back to ourselves and back to our intuition, which is really asking ourselves that question, our intuition, I find, a lot of times, is asking a question and looking for the answer. That's my intuition for me. It's not really vague. It's more like, hey, I have this question, and then the answer pops into my head as to what it is. Yeah. So when the focus goes from how do I control this situation and this person, how do I make it stop, how do I make it change, whatever, to what do I need right now, just asking the question starts to turn that energy around, and our intuition starts speaking to us then.
I think that's so important because, there can be this sort of inner conversation happening for people in their heads going, that person should know what I need. They should just know. That person should know what I need and meet my needs automatically, Before we get to that point, before what that looks like beforehand is having this unspoken expectation of that person should just know, right? And that's where the frustration and anger may come in. Like, that person isn't meeting my needs, and they should know, and it's up to them to meet my needs. Without making the effort to, first of all, know what we need ourselves, and to ask for that without self-righteousness, in a many different ways, so that we can get our needs met. I think that's super important. Have you come across that in any of your working with clients for yourself?
About meeting needs? Yeah, and that's really the efficiency thing. When we wait for someone else to make us feel good or make us feel better, we're going to be waiting a really, really, really long time. Because other people have their own lives they're living. They've got their own things that they're thinking about. It's natural for us to be thinking about our own world and our own problems and our own existence. And you're going to stand there a really long time if you wait for somebody else to step up. And it feels very almost like you're being victimized or disempowering. But when you start putting things in place where you're like, these are the needs that I have. I need community. I need conversation. I need water. I need, movement and activity. When you start realizing what you need and making sure that you get it, that's the game changer, because now you're going from being worn down and wore out and can't think straight, and your brain's foggy, to being nourished. To your body being happy, to your mind being clear, your gut, keeping your inflammation down, your energy level up. And so even if you're in these situations with people who are, toxic or angry or, or aggressive, because you feel good, because you're doing things that make you feel good and that are nourishing you, you're in a much better place. And so then, when I had, I did an ad a couple weeks ago, and for the first time I had somebody who's kind of an internet troll, she came on and, said all sorts of crazy things about me. I had no idea who she was, but it didn't really bother me. I mean, it bothered me enough, but it was more like, oh, well, this is interesting. Whereas if I'd been run down and worn out and exhausted, I would have, been really upset by that. I wouldn't have been able to handle it. And then my energy and what I brought to the table would have encouraged it, would have made it worse, would have turned it from somebody who, looks like they're mean spirited to now this big, long, drawn out soap opera, in the comment section on Facebook, which you see a lot of people do. They've got these crazy long arguments in the comment section of article that's been shared. It's nuts.
And Twitter too. Twitter, yeah, and again, I think it's the way that it's done as well. Because if people come from this place that I'm right and I know I'm right, and that's okay to know that you believe in what you're saying, but if it's coming from this place of self-righteousness and no one gets the message, there's no conversation, it's not really a dialogue. It's just about being right, and being the victim and what the other person did to them. So I'm so glad to hear that you had a troll on your Facebook and you just weren't triggered by it. That's great.
Well, it was interesting because, when she finally said something that had gone too far, I said, okay, that's my boundary. And it was neat because even just by putting in there and telling, this person that this is my boundary, that freed me, because what it did was I give myself permission not to respond anymore. I give myself permission to not engage, to not have a comment, to not care. And it's not that I don't care, but to not invest all of this energy and time, into someone who who needed more therapy than anything, who was troubled. So it's, when we set that line, it frees us because it gives us permission to think about what we need in order to be balanced and whole, and not expend all of this energy on people that they're comfortable in, in that conflict. They like it. It's where they swim, and it's not where I swim. And it's like, well, I don't like it, but I'm sure if you keep looking around, you'll find somebody else who does. I'm looking for the people that have a dialogue with me, that can communicate.
Conflict is a normal part of life in terms of there will always be differences and differences of opinion. So that's, if I mean, so like things may conflict, there may be pressure, time pressure, conflicting schedules, conflicting ideas, conflicting priorities. So I think we're never going to be able to go through life and there's never going to be a problem. So there may be differences of opinion, those sort of things, different values. But again, being able to have a conversation where both, or however many people parties are sort of in their right mind, and have this idea of like what they want the outcome to be, going in to the conversation with the intention, I want to connect and I want this to go well and I want us to find a solution, is totally different to going in the conversation feeling wrong, feeling like you're in this, there's going to be the blame game,
Mm-hmm. Right. It's taking your own power back and saying, this is who I want to be. This is how I want to feel. This is the experience I want to have. And when you do that and give yourself permission to do that, that's what starts to change all of the, what's going on around you then. Because now, you're not, now you're not as entertaining, I think.
Yeah.
So because you're not as entertaining, I had a great mentor who said, be who you are, and you don't have to get rid of anybody, because they'll get rid of themselves. They won't like what you have to say. They won't appreciate your opinion. They won't, value the experience that you want to have. And so when you let yourself kind of be yourself, and that's the big fear, isn't it? That if I'm myself, then everybody's going to leave. And I think this is what we're trying to tell women, and everybody especially, is you there are a lot of people in the world, a lot of people out there. And just because the people in your circle, are at a certain level in the ocean, doesn't mean that there aren't a lot of other people out there that are healthier, that are balanced, that can communicate, that want to have good dialogue, that are doing their work. There's a lot of people like that out there, but you have to look for them. You have to actively seek them out, and you'll find that you'll be interesting to them because they'll appreciate, and think it's profound and awesome that that you do these self-care things and that you have these insights and understandings.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I love that. So empowering.
So, do you know what time it is?
No, I don't. Let me have a look and see what's going on in the phone. I actually don't know. No.
I don't either.
Yeah. Let me see. I'm going to try and do this. I don't know if it's going to go off though. I just don't want it to go off.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I don't know what the time is now.
Okay. No worries. Well, I'm thinking it's just about time for us to wrap up. It feels about that way, doesn't it? So, is there anything else you'd like to add, Shona?
No, I just think that's such an important conversation to have, and I'm glad that we could sit down and chat. Yeah, and I hope it's been helpful to anyone who's been listening. So yeah, I've enjoyed it.
I had a lot of fun. I'm so grateful that that you came tonight and you stayed up late to do this, and you're such a good friend. Thank you. You're one of the people that people need to seek out.
Oh,
That if they're looking for that coaching or they're looking for that support, you're absolutely one of the people that has done her work. And when you find somebody like that, it's kind of gold, because it is, it's not common. A lot of people don't put that time and effort in, and so you have to keep your eyes open, have people jump through a few hoops, and only give that that energy and that time to people who want the same things that you do. It's very cool. So thank you for being such a wonderful part of my life.
Such a pleasure. The feeling is mutual, Rita. You're amazing.
Cool.
I love you.
Very cool. Well, I will see you soon, and I hope you have a great evening and get some sleep, okay?
I will. Have a good one.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Thanks.